Hey everybody, this is Gregory from Dapp University. So welcome back to this multi-part tutorial series where I'm showing you how to build a full-length blockchain application step by step. So I imagine if you're at this point in the tutorial, you've been watching the other videos, but if you haven't, go ahead and check those out, all right? This is the next video in the series where we're gonna actually start building out the client-side application for this social media network that runs on the blockchain, all right? So let's go ahead and start programming. Now let's start building out the client-side application for this project. Up until now, we've just been creating these smart contracts that go on the blockchain. All right, that's effectively our back-end part of this application. Now let's work on the front end, which is going to be the website that talks to the smart contracts on the blockchain and allows users to add posts to the social network, see all the posts, and also issue tips for the posts. Okay, so a few quick things. First things first, if you're checking out this point in the video, make sure you have all your dependencies installed. You can just do npm install to make sure everything is there. And also make sure that your blockchain is running. This is Ganache, right? Make sure this is open and connected to your project. And lastly, make sure you have your server started. And well, I guess also make sure you've migrated your smart contracts as well. Remember, we did that in the last video with truffle, migrate, -- reset, okay? So let's go take a look at the website again. Make sure you start your server, npm run start. This should open your browser to the project. So here's where we left off last time. Remember, this is all the boilerplate code that comes with our starter kit. And what we want to do is start, modifying this code to build out our social network website. Again, we've got the Bootstrap templating framework so that we don't have to write a lot of CSS ourselves. And we're also using React.js, which I'm going to walk you through step by step in this video. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the project code in Sublime Text, and we'll go to the source directory, the components directory, and go to app.js, okay? And let's bump this up so you can read it. This is the main JavaScript file that we're going to edit, all right? So this is, React. This is a React component. So React is a component-based library that allows us to write JavaScript in these reusable components. In this case, an app is a component, and it mixes JavaScript, which is this right here, with HTML code, which is this right here, right? You can put HTML inside this JavaScript code. That's how it renders this onto the page. All right, and you can also see JavaScript is rendered here inside these curly braces, and yeah, that's how it works. So everything inside the return is the HTML that gets rendered onto the page from this render function. Okay, whatever's returned from render gets put on the page. So let's go ahead and edit this. The first thing I want to do is connect this application to the blockchain. All right, we effectively want to turn this basic web app into a blockchain app. So how do we get this app to talk to the blockchain? Well, we use the Web3.js library, right? That's going to be one part. We need to turn our app into a blockchain app. That's what Web3.js is going to do. And then we also need to turn our browser into a blockchain browser. And that's what MetaMask is going to do. All right, so I'll walk you through setting up both of those. We need to connect the app to the blockchain with Web3.js and then the browser with MetaMask. So the first thing we'll do is instantiate a connection of Web3 inside the JavaScript application. Okay, we're going to connect to Ganache, our personal blockchain, and I'll show you how to do that. So the first thing that we do is just import the Web3.js library. We've installed it inside of our dependencies in the package.json file. So we import Web3 like this, all right? And once we're inside of here, we can just load our connection to the blockchain inside of a special function, okay? So I'm going to create a function called load Web3. This will be an async function. So we'll say async load Web3. And inside of here, I want to write all the code that actually takes the connection from MetaMask, right? This thing here, and wires it up to our Web3 and reads it inside of this Web3 connection inside of our app. Okay, so there's no reason to reinvent how you do this. MetaMask actually tells us how to do this, and I've got a link right here. from an article put out by MetaMask that recommends the best way of doing this. All right, so you can essentially just copy and paste this inside of your own project, but I'm going to do it basically that way, and also just kind of clean it up a little bit while I paste their idea in. So feel free to check out my completed code on GitHub in order to get this implementation, but this is essentially what MetaMask tells you to do. So don't worry if you don't completely understand this, that's okay. Essentially all it does is it looks for an Ethereum provider inside your window, and if it doesn't have one, it basically creates a new one with Web3. And if it can't find MetaMask, it'll basically say, hey, there's no MetaMask here, please install it, okay? All right, so that's pretty basic. Don't worry if you don't understand everything inside of there, but that's how it works. So we've defined this function, but we want to call it whenever this component is loaded. So React has some special functions that do some magic. One of them is called component will mount. So we'll say async component mount, all right? And inside of here, we actually want to call this Web3, load Web3. We'll say this. Okay, so essentially what this says is like, whenever this component is going to mount to the DOM, the virtual DOM inside of React, we want to call this function where we load Web3, and we want to wait for it to happen before we do anything else. All right, that's exactly what this does. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll save this. And we'll go back to the page. We can say, let's just say here, go back to the page, refresh, take a look, and awesome, no errors. So now we have Web3 connected to our app, and our app is now a blockchain application. So let's try to fetch some actual data from the blockchain. The first thing I want to do is fetch the account from MetaMask, okay? So remember, how dApps work or how blockchain apps work is you don't log in necessarily with a username and password. You basically have your username, which is your account, inside of your wallet in your browser like this with MetaMask. So MetaMask essentially is your user management. Your app doesn't do the user management. So we can fetch the account information directly from the wallet with Web3. So I'll show you how to do that right now. So here's the function inside the Web3 documentation. We're going to use Web3, the ETH namespace, and we're going to say get accounts. All right, so this is a function we're going to use. And what this is going to do is return an array of accounts that are available to us from MetaMask. All right, so you can see the example here. You call Web3 ETH get accounts. They're using a promise, or they're using a promise chain, and then, but we're going to use async await. But anyways, this is what it returns, right? This array of accounts. So in our case, we want to get the first account inside this array, and that's going to be our user of the social network who's logged in using the app. So I'll show you how to do that right now. Go back to the application, and I'm going to create a new function called load blockchain data. So async load blockchain data, all right? And the first piece of data we want to load is actually the account itself. So first we're going to get the Web3 connection, which we created. So we said window.web3, right, equals this. So we'll say const web3 equals window.web3. All right, and then we want to load the account. All right. So we're going to use the function we just saw in the documentation, const accounts equals await web3.eth.get accounts. All right. So let's just log that value to the console, console.log accounts, and let's see what comes back. Okay, so nothing yet, and I know why. It's because we defined this function, but we didn't call it, right? We said load blockchain data, but we need to add this to this component will mount function. So after we load Web3, after it's finished, because we wait, we load the blockchain data. So await this.load blockchain data. All right, save that. Try again. All right, there we go. We can see an account listed. Now, you may not see an account just yet. And if you do, it may not be the right one. So a couple things to check out. First, you want to disable privacy mode, or if you do have privacy mode enabled, you want to connect to the application. So here's an article. I can put a link to this in the description. I'll go ahead and copy it and paste it in my notes right now. If you have trouble with your accounts, you might want to reference this, because privacy mode inside of MetaMask might be part of your problem. But another thing is, you may not actually have imported your account from Ganache just yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So open Ganache, and let's see here. I'm going to take the first 3 accounts, just like we used from our test, and I'm going to import the private keys into MetaMask. So these are like the passwords. So we'll copy these, and like, don't use these accounts for real cryptocurrency, because I've shown them on screen. But I'm going to copy the first one. I'm going to go to MetaMask. All right, and I'm going to import account, private key, paste in the private key, import, and this says I already have done this, so that's okay. I'm going to do it again for each one. All right, copy. All right, so once you've successfully imported all these, I'm going to go ahead and rename them just so that we know which each account is. So the first one is going to be the deployer. The second one is going to be the post creator, and the third one's going to be the tipper. So I'll do that right now. I'll rename this. Go to settings. And let's see here, details. Say deployer. All right. And then I'll go to this one, edit this one as well. See, post creator. And then the last one, tipper. All right, save that. Now you should have MetaMask properly configured. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to the post creator, because the primary account that I want to use in order to interact with the application. So I'll refresh the page, and this address should be the same as the account that's, number 2 inside of Ganache if you imported these in the correct order. All right. So that should verify that you are actually connected to Ganache. You've imported it into MetaMask, and that's the account. All right. Now I want to actually list this account out on the page so that we can see, which account we're signed in with whenever we use the application. All right. So what I'm going to do is actually store the address after we fetch it from Web3 right here. Okay. So I'm going to use React's state object. Okay. So React has basically a state that belongs to a component, and this state kind of tells us, what state the application's in. That's a really bad explanation, but I think you'll get the idea when I start implementing it. All right, so we can define a state inside of our component like this. All right, that's what it looks like. So these components have a constructor function as well, and they take something called props, which are essentially properties for the component, just an object. And we want to call super on this. So don't worry if you don't understand that completely. This is just what React tells us to do. But this is what the state object looks like. It's called this.state, and it's just an object, right? It has some values in it. And this value that we want to set is the account. So we'll store the account here, and we'll read this later. All right. So we can store the account like this. After we've fetched it with Web3, we'll just assign it to the state. So React has a special function for doing that. It'll say this.setState, all right? And we'll just say account is accounts 0, all right? So let me explain that, right? Accounts was an array that came back from this function, and we would just want the first account in the list. That's the one that we're connected to MetaMask with. All right, and then we just assign this.setState, and we pass in the account and just say it's the first one. Okay. Now, because we've done that, we'll have access to this account with the state object anywhere inside this component, and we can also pass it down to other components. All right. So right now, I'm going to show you how to do that. I'll go to this navbar. All right. Let's see here. So up here at the top, we're going to create a new section for the address. So inside the nav bar, just after this link, all right, I'm going to paste in a section that we're going to use to hold the account, just like this. All right. So this is just a list item, all right, that is going to show the account. So I can show you what that looks like. All right, there we go. So this is just a component, or not really a component, it's a bootstrap way of doing things where we can just add something to the nav bar that's going to go on the right-hand side, and we can put the account there. So let's go back to the browser. So you can see your account goes here as small gray text, right? So what we actually want to do is display the Ethereum address right here. So we can just say, we can use some curly braces to execute JavaScript inside of here, like this, and say this.state.account. Save that, go back to the page, and boom, there we go. We can see the account listed right there, all right? So now what I want to do is actually take this component and put it inside its own file. We're using one big, React component right now, and I want to break this up into smaller files. So, React components are able to render other React components. So I'll create a new file here in the same directory called navbar, capital N, navbar.js. All right. And so what we want to do is create a new React component inside of here, just like the other one. All right. So it's pretty straightforward. Boom. We just add the new content like this. All right. Feel free to go ahead and pause the video right now if you want to take an in-depth look at this. But what it does is it works just like the other component does. We just import React and component, right? And we give it a name, navbar. And it has a basic render function just like the other component. And we put all the HTML and JavaScript for the navbar inside here. So we'll go back to our navbar, find this nav element. I'm going to just copy it, or cut it actually, and paste it inside of here. All right. So we'll do that. And inside of here, what I want to do is render it out. So in order to do that, we have to import that component we just created. Go to the top of the file, and let's see here. Let's do it just after this. Let's say import navbar. All right. And now we want to render the navbar out on the page, and we'll do it just like this. Scroll down, find where the navbar was before. Right, it's just above the container, and we'll do this. We'll just say navbar. Okay, and then actually we want to do that. Okay, so that would render it out, but if we do that, we'll notice that it doesn't know what this.state.account is. All right, it's gonna break it. So the state object from this component is not accessible inside of this component. All right, so we have to pass down that value some other way. So we do that like this. We say account. All right, we can just tell this component what the account's going to be, and we can say this.state.account, right, which is what we used originally, and that'll pass this account variable down here. So we read that account variable inside this component, not with this.state.account, but with this.props.account. All right. So props is just a shortcut for, or shorthand for the component properties. And that's the same thing we saw here inside the constructor, props, right? Component properties. So these are just variable values, right? So, and these are props right here. Like that's what this looks like. Okay. All right, so let's save that, go back to the page, and there we go. Boom. We've got the address. So that's going to be like our username on the blockchain. So the next thing I want to do is use a cool avatar for the blockchain users. All right, this is something new for this tutorial. If you guys have seen my other tutorials before, this is going to be a new trick just for you all. Okay, so what I want to do is use something called identicons. So identicons are going to be a way that we can actually generate cool, avatars for the users based on their Ethereum address. Okay, what it does is it gives you a function that will generate a new identicon from some sort of data, right? and this data will spit out, a cool image like this. And in this case, we can just use a unique image for each Ethereum address that we create. All right, that's going to be our avatar on the blockchain. So I'm going to install it in the project because we haven't installed it yet. Normally, you would just do npm install identicon.js --save, but I'm going to specify the version. So I'm going to go to the package.json file. And let's see here, I'm going to say, paste this in. So you want to get this from my project. This is identicon.js version 2.3.3, right? So I'm going to save that. In order to reinstall this, we need to stop the server and say npm install. All right, it worked. So again, we got some warnings and some errors here, but it actually added the package. I realize these aren't ideal, guys. Sorry about that, but it's working. All right, so we'll start the server again with npm run start. All right, let's go back to our page, make sure everything is still working after installing the packages. Yep, all good. Okay, so now let's add the identicon for the user in the navbar. So we'll just import the newly created library, or the newly added library, I should say. All right, so after React, we'll import identicon. All right, just like this. And we'll add the image to the account like this. So identicon tells us that we need to do it like this. Let's see here. We give it an image with a width and a height, and we use data as a source, and we concatenate the string. So I'm not going to do it like this. This is kind of a crazy way of doing it. That won't work for our React project. I'll show you how to do it custom for our purpose. All right, so let's see here. Say image, and then we're going to say class name. We'll say ML2. That's just a bootstrap utility. Say width. Let's do 30, and then height equals 30. And then, sorry, I'll pull this up. We'll say source. All right, so we want to do what identicon told us to do and, use this. All right, that's the basic source that it tells us to use, but we actually want to pass the data in after that. So see source, data, image, yada, yada, yada. This is telling you to add strings together. We're using ES6 so we can actually interpolate. That's what these little backticks do. All right. So I'm just going to use $ and execute JavaScript inside of here. And this is this is probably not the best way of doing this, but I'm going to do it all in line just so that you see how it works. So I say new identicon, and then say this .props.account. All right, and then they tell us to give us a size. So this is 420. We're using 30. All right, so 30. And then say to string. All right. So that's kind of funny looking. And we also need to give our image a closing tag. Let's see here. All right, I'm going to give this a new line. All right. That's kind of crazy looking, but it's just easier to read. I could put this inside of a new function or something like that. Certainly refactor this to make it look better, but that's the gist of how this works, okay? We're just creating a new image with a source, and we create a new identicon with the Ethereum address that we're passing in with this .props.account. Okay, so lastly, we only want to do this if an account actually exists, or else it'll break. So we'll say this.props.account. So if it exists, basically what we're going to do is use a ternary operator, which is just saying if this is true, then do this. If not, then do something else. That's really pseudocode, but you get the idea. So if it does exist, we want to render out the image. All right, so we'll copy this. All right, and we'll format it. And if not, we just want to, we'll just give it an empty span tag. All right. There's probably a better way of doing that, but that's the idea. Okay, so save that, go back to the page and see if it worked. Boom, there we go. Awesome. So we can see our fancy new avatar here on the blockchain. This is going to be our avatar for this particular user that we're logged in with. All right, so that's it for this section, guys. You've connected your app to the blockchain. You now have a blockchain-based application. You've connected with MetaMask. You've got your accounts imported. We can see our account on the page, and you have a cool new avatar that represents your user on the blockchain. So I hope you all like this video. I hope that's a cool new trick to any of you who've been watching this channel for a while. I think you'll like this. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and start creating posts so we can list them out on the page, and then we'll continue on tipping and stuff like that and build out the full social network in the next video.